way are we walking?
This way. Looks like there's a bunch of stuff on the beach up this way.
Nice.
I think this is a tube worm shell.
Oh, yeah. We see these a lot.
Yeah, I found one the other day at the previous beach that we were at that was kind of like a crazy corkscrew. Ooh, crab.
Yeah, I feel like...
Look at the purple on this one. Whoa.
Otherwise looking very albino.
Yeah, it's really white, except for just like purple on the very tips of its claws. Wow, that's really pretty. When we first got on the road, our objectives were to see the big things. You know, the Grand Canyons, the Redwoods, the Yosemites. These really big, awe-inspiring places. And I think that over time, as we checked those boxes, and I would venture to say when we started to move slower. And I think that that came after changing into more reliable rigs that allowed us to go further off the beaten path. It kind of gave us this ability to sit still and to go deeper and to stay out much longer. And over time, it kind of felt like our objectives slowly started to change.
I saw a couple of porcupine fish on the beach last night.
It no longer felt like we were after these like huge landmark destinations, but our focus instead turned onto the details. Oh, I meant to tell you. Okay, so yesterday when we were in the water, I was like, what do these things eat? Because they all look like they're just sitting around waiting for something to happen. And they also seemingly are unafraid of us getting anywhere near them. And so Chase and I looked it up. They eat small crustaceans, clams, algae, and things of that nature. So I guess it makes sense that they have beaks for the sake of eating crustacean.
They do kind of have a beak. Forget about that.
They definitely have beaks. So for instance, like when we take a break from work, trying to get some exercise, we'll just point in a direction and wander that way. And as we've started to do that, we've just are observing. Like we don't really have any objectives. And it's been incredible how much we have learned by pure observation. And to be honest with you, I think that I've been really amazed by how much you can learn by simply slowing down and paying attention. Oh, this is a piece of a turtle shell.
Oh, nice. I picked up the other one that Stella took from me the other day.
Oh, whoa, what is that?
I'm not sure. Maybe it's also...
It's a bone of some description. It looks... Ooh.
Hard to tell.
We met two people that have a very similar taste for wandering and just observing the natural world. And these are our friends Chase and Amy. We met them right before COVID. And I think that the first thing I noticed about them was their enjoyment in just wandering around and observing. They never really felt like they needed to have an objective, which is something that I really admire because, you know, when you are like, let's go for a walk. I don't know how long we're going to be gone. I don't really know what we're going to be doing. I don't know what we're going to see, but just enjoying that. You find anything interesting on your walk?
A couple things.
You checking for dead things?
Yeah.
By sniffing it?
We're trying to figure out what this belongs to.
And then, so for comparison, this is from a turtle shell. It seems like maybe fishy.
Probably not fishy.
Fishy, birdie.
I would say bird or turtle just because the bones have like marrow and stuff in them, like fish bones.
Oh, do they not?
Yeah, no, I don't think so. I guess,
Whoa! Look at this puffer.
yeah, the way it's puffed up, that's pretty fun.
Oh.
Yeah, I think that's...
This is the kind that hangs from the ceiling in a gift shop.
Yeah.
on the point out there, there's probably like 200 or 300 of these just on the ground. They're not all puffed up like that.
Oh my gosh, that's so mega puffed.
just-
Oh, that's so beautiful, the pen shell clam.
I wonder though, like, how the attrition rate of these
I know.
Porcupine fish seems so
And
high.
there's so
Well,
many babies.
It's
Yeah.
because
so many
like
tiny ones.
it's because none of them seem motivated to do anything, including feed themselves.
I wonder if it's just like because of their buoyancy. They're like so easily tossed on shore by the waves.
Yeah, they're not.
You know?
They
Their
don't.
fins are tiny.
Yeah, they don't
can't,
seem
swim
like
fast.
proficient, agile
They don't seem
swimmers.
proficient in swimming.
But basically, like every like high tide, like full moon tide,
There's
it's
just
always
like,
getting dumped.
It's just a massacre.
yeah.
Oh my God. Chase and Amy, as our friendship has developed, they're incredibly talented artists. The two of them make fly fishing films. Chase is a wildly talented scientific illustrator, and his wife, Amy, is a very talented photographer. And the two of them just make an incredibly dynamic duo for fantastic storytelling. Obviously, I'll include all the links to their work because I highly recommend it. But so as I've been kind of thinking about this shift away from the big sights, the big things, and more to the details, I just felt like I needed to talk to Chase because I think that he is a person that looks at the world in this way. I think that he also brings the same perspective into his work, and he just felt like the perfect person to sit down and discuss the art of observation. So my parents always thought I was going to be an archaeologist because I was always staring at the ground,
Right.
picking things up, asking questions about them. I liked to go to the beach with small paintbrushes for pretending like I was like, finding dinosaur bones.
Oh, right. For like uncovering.
Yes, naturally. Because like anything with a hard edge is just too dangerous for an artifact.
Yeah.
Were you observant as a kid of like the natural world?
Yeah, it's funny. Actually, I have a super similar story. I don't know if my parents thought I would be an archaeologist or a paleontologist, but I certainly thought I was going to be those things. And my parents,
Yes, of course.
I've always been very supportive, so they were willing to follow me down that path. But yeah, same thing. I made my parents buy me like dental tools, like dental picks and stuff for doing the same thing. And we actually, my particular thing was paleontology, like most young boys, I was like obsessed with dinosaurs.
Yes, of course.
And yeah, we went on a whole road trip one summer out to the Badlands because, this is pre-internet, pre-information age. Somewhere we heard, there's fossils in the Badland and like anyone can dig for them. So we thought we were going to go have like a full-blown, paleontological
Discovery
site mission. Yeah, and we were told kindly by the park rangers at the entrance that no, we were not allowed to go dig for fossils. That was earth-shattering for me as a kid, but yeah.
But my dreams persisted.
Yeah.
Okay, so kind of like as you were growing up, did you feel like you ever kind of like lost track of that like sense of like I think that I always kind of had these like two tracks in mind. Art was always very present as like a thing for me. But I feel like science was maybe some form of science. I thought I was going to be a dolphin trainer. That was like what I was, I felt like any girl that grew up with Lisa Frank was pretty stoked on like dolphin training. And all of my like science projects were on various types of dolphins. And I don't know, I just like always kind of assumed that would be what I did for my education. And then when push came to shove, it just felt like I had to choose one over the other. Mm-hmm. And ultimately I did. I chose art, and I think that as I started to like move in the direction of studying fine art, I do feel like at some point I kind of like lost track. Yeah.
Well, I think there's probably, or at least the best of my understanding, there's sort of like a dichotomy that exists in general between the natural world and the human world, right? You can hear everyone and their mom talk about this sort of separation between, humans and nature, right? The forest and the city and, all that stuff. We tend to sort of view anything that people do as sort of outside of the natural space, sort of unnatural, man-made, and then everything else in the exterior world is organic, natural. And when you're a little kid, when someone's born, you don't exist yet in the human world. You pretty much exist in the natural world. And even that's sort of on like a micro scale, on a macro scale, like human civilization, human existence is very recent in terms of the just like evolutionary timeline of all creatures, and we're creatures, right? So I think our like base default settings are as sort of natural animals, and I think it's been, well, I don't think this, I know this from what I've learned from evolutionary biologists. I think it's really important for people to be observant to survive, and particularly observant of the natural world. Again, it's the only world that exists when we're born, and our ability to identify plants and critters and, safe spaces and patterns in nature is what's allowed us to become the most dominant species on the planet. So I think when you're born as a kid, you have all those tools in your tool set, and your default setting is to be observant of the natural world. And I think as you grow older and are socialized into this sort of unnatural human world, you find yourself at that crossroads and you're pulled away from that stuff. Unless you're like some hippy dippy forest kid who was, raised on a commune or whatever.
Yeah.
So I think that's probably a pretty normal path for most people. I mean, everyone's observant at different levels. Everyone has different skill sets and different tendencies. But I think if you look at any little kid, like walking around on the beach, what are they doing? They're staring at the ground, they're picking stuff up, they're feeling stuff, they're looking at stuff, they're absorbing information. We're basically just sponges. And there's so much information and diversity in the natural world. So yeah, that was certainly my path as a kid. Sounds like it was your path as a kid, but I think for most kids, that's probably the path in general, until they discover all the burdensome other realities of human existence that has to take their attention and time. I had a similar path in that when I was young and free to do whatever I want, all I wanted to do was be outside and play outside and play pretend archaeologist, play pretend botanist, play pretend biologist, whatever. My head was always buried in encyclopedias of wildlife and natural subjects. And then as I got, that honestly probably followed me in through like grade school into middle school. And then, I got interested in all the other stuff that middle school boys get interested in, sports, girls, skateboarding took a huge role in my life. And I certainly, you never change who you are. Those same sort of like interests and principles that led your life when you were younger continue through those other facets, but most of that stuff in the people world is decidedly away from nature and natural spaces. So you don't get to flex those muscles in the same way. And then, mid-20s onwards, after sort of doing the like young social human thing, now I find myself more and more retreating back into private, quiet, outdoor spaces.
Yeah, it felt, and it's really interesting because I think it was just like maybe my limited human experience. I felt like I had to make a choice between the two.
Yeah, totally.
But I think that as I've gotten older, what I've come to realize is that, those different facets of who you are just present through everything that you do and participate in. And it's funny because it felt like I took this fork in the road, but really and truly it was just like the road meeting back meeting back up with itself. But it's just like so interesting to me. I think that I don't know, you become self-absorbed and you just like, it's not that I wasn't paying attention to the natural world. It just didn't feel like it was something that was drawing my attention as heavily. And then as soon as we got back on the road, and again, it's like, oh, I'm a designer, I'm a creative, that is this thing. And like my love for nature and the outdoors is this other thing. But I've come to realize that they're one and the same, and one feeds the other in a way that I just don't think I ever gave it credit for.
Yeah, I think that comes with maturity in general. Let's be honest, like being a science or biology geek when you're like 14 is not cool.
I feel like
I look at it now
be.
as an adult and I'm like, yeah, that's really cool. But if you're a kid in that situation, like you're a nerd, you know? And so a lot of people do feel forced. I don't know, find the path of least resistance in navigating complicated social realities of being an adolescent and a youth. And also, yeah, I don't know, interests do vary. Like I said, all the things that make us people, the drives that we have built into us, also include like chasing after boys or girls, or, you know, socializing in ways like sports and careers and work and jobs and, you know.
Life things.
Yeah, life things. That's sort of the, if we were still living in hunter-gatherer communities, you know, all that stuff would still be poured into hunting or gathering, which would involve all that kind of stuff we're
Right.
talking about. Close observation of the natural world, immersion in the natural world, but those aren't the societal structures that we have today in 2025 or whatever,
Yeah.
30 years ago when we were growing up.
Yeah, it's funny because like I felt like when we first got on the road, I felt like we were traveling to go see these like big, awe-inspiring like destinations and landscapes. But the more we've traveled, the less I feel like that's what we're after. And the more I find myself just wanting to like hone in on smaller details
Sure.
of places. And I think that at the core of like maybe this topic of what is so interesting to me is like I always just thought that in order to like glean information from the natural world, you had to have a degree. You had to be a scientist
Right.
of some description or an ologist of some description. But I think that what is so intriguing to me is like how much I feel like I have learned by purely observing.
Totally.
And I think that something that is really funny, because when people are like, what are you out here doing most of the time? And it's literally just wandering around, like looking at things and gleaming information from random things that we find along the way.
Yeah.
And I know for a fact that you like to do that too.
Yeah, I've gotten that a lot actually from people as well. Recently, we're in the Mojave and we were near a research station, but we were camped on the outskirts and on some BLM land. And some birders were out walking, and I was out birding, but I also had a camera with big long telephoto lens on it. And they were like, "Oh, what are you doing?" And I was like, "Oh, you know, I'm looking for birds." And they're like, "Oh, for research." And I was like,
No.
well, kind of. My own personal research that benefits no one but myself. But yeah, well, I think the dirty secret about all ologists is that it's essentially the exact same thing. It's predicated on generational knowledge of observation. That's like what science is in general.
Yeah.
Right? The principles of science are observation of the known visible world. And before there were universities and before there were degrees, the OG ologists were just people like you and me, just going out, looking at stuff and recording their findings and comparing their findings to their own findings and other people's notes and et cetera. And, you know, the only tools that we had available, that people had available to themselves, were essentially their senses, you know, sight, sound, smell, touch. Like that's everything they knew about the natural world was based on what they could easily observe without, you know, advanced technology. And technology is whatever, that's on a spectrum. You know, binoculars are a type of technology, but now, of course, we have really, really advanced measuring tools and observational tools and technology. You know, we can sequence genomes and understand more about critters than anyone looking through binoculars could by just comparing the plumages
getting like
of a
legitimate
bird.
metrics to put to observation.
Right, and I think, unfortunately, the sciences are a little stuffy. I think people lean really heavily on sort of like superior technological advancement in the sciences. So at one time, you know, the early naturalists who were just out there looking at stuff going, hey, this thing kind of looks like that
This
thing.
other
You know,
thing.
the Darwins, the Audubons, you know,
Yeah.
those early naturalists. That was like state of the art. Those are scientific rock stars. Now, as it sort of specialized and the technology has advanced, you kind of look at like, well, the real scientists, the people doing the real work, are the ones in laboratories or the ones with high degrees or whatever. The people who are out, you know, doing essentially exactly what Darwin or Audubon were doing, are just like low-level hobbyists.
They're you and me.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, oh boy, how much are you really discovering about the natural
I
world
feel like
by
that's
just
such
putzing around outside?
I feel like that's such an unfair assessment of it, though.
Yeah, I think that's true, and I think that probably like 80% of the meat of understanding the world around us can be gleaned purely from those simple methods of observation, and then the really nitty gritty extra 20%, which is all
There's
cool
value
and
there
useful
too.
and valuable information, is gained from that higher. And even if you went and you got a degree in biology or ecology, you're just going to be it's all the same stuff. You're just being informed by other groups of informed people who are informed by generational knowledge or whatever. And then at the end they say, you have learned enough to now be an expert, but you can achieve expertise entirely on your own. I'm not trying to say that like no one should go to college and like if you just go out and spend enough time out in the woods, you're an expert. But I mean, it really is.
I just feel like
true.
it's just like the social like structure around going to college, so to speak. But I feel like that has been a little bit of a revelation to me, was because I did feel like I had to choose between two passions, and it's been wildly satisfying that my 9 years of time on the road and effectively like living out in nature, I feel like I can now read a terrain and understand like what has happened to it over the course of history to create it. And I feel like, I don't know, it feels like I've gotten this like satisfying experiential education over the last few years that has been, I would say, just as gratifying, if not more, because it's been like hard fought and won.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think at the end of the day, there are truths about the world, about nature and the observable universe that are made clear to people observing in the field that are not known, may not yet be known, may be semi-known but ignored by high degree holding ologists who aren't out in the field, who are, at home or in a lab or in a university writing papers. You hear about this stuff all the time. Wildlife biologists telling Joe Schmo hunter in Iowa that deer don't act a certain way. It's impossible. It's never been observed. Meanwhile, he's up in his deer stand seeing it
all the
firsthand.
time.
So I don't think that we've I don't think that we've advanced to the point as people that we've left behind the need to just see with our eyes, and whatever, feel with our feet and smell with our noses, and because there's like just really cool stuff going on. And to your point of getting to spend so much time so closely with nature, you're just there to see it. And
it's it's a very unbiased perspective because I'm just taking it in.
Right. Well, and because you sort of make a point of traveling to places where there aren't a lot of other people, you're the only one seeing whenever that is. And every experience that you have is unique, Who knows? You might be watching, some gull on the beach doing something no one's ever seen before.
Some weird gull with like an extra beak part that we happen to have witnessed.
Yeah. And I view all those experiences, big and small, like you said, standing on the edge of the Grand Canyon to combing in the sand for shells smaller than your pinky nail. They all sort of like deepen your knowledge and your experience and inform you of the richness of the world around us.
I think that it's made me, obviously, like, I hit the road because I love being outside, but and you think that like when you make this decision to go out and spend a lot of time in nature, you're like, I love this as much as I could possibly love this.
Right.
And I feel like I have just fallen even deeper in love with the world because of just seeing the interconnectivity, the creativity of life, and how much is truly happening every day that is not being witnessed. It never needs to be witnessed.
Yeah.
It's just unfolding as it should, as it does.
Yeah, I think there's a depth to nature that is hard to fully wrap your mind around, appreciate, until you just spend a lot of time sort of sifting through it. I fancied myself, a well-rounded naturalist, just sort of over the course of my life growing up and having interest in these things and being an avid outdoorsman and an angler and a hiker and, I'm an illustrator who's focused primarily on natural illustration, which on its own is this whole other sort of side quest of minute detail observation to be able to really see something, to be able to replicate it with scientific accuracy. So I sort of fancy myself, like, if you asked me, like, oh, you interested in birds? Oh yeah, I love birds. I paint birds. I've been looking at birds my whole life. I got bird books. Like, I know a lot about birds. But in the last year, my wife Amy and I have started, like, birding, capital B, birding more seriously. And
so you're in your 30s now.
Yeah, exactly. And I came pretty quickly to the conclusion that, like, I don't know anything about birds.
Do you like that feeling?
Yeah.
Of just like having yourself like mentally leveled like that?
Yeah.
I do too.
Totally. It turns out what I thought, and there is some truth that, like, a year ago I probably knew more about birds than your average whatever high school baseball coach or something, because it has been a field that I've been interested in from the periphery, but it turns out, like, oh yeah, I've actually only noticed, like, the most conspicuous birds imaginable.
Yeah.
And I thought that was, like, what was going on with birds. And well, this is actually a good example of how, fancy schmancy Ivy League technology has assisted in that understanding. And we're at an interesting time now where there's, like, this democratization of that kind of tech, which is another reason why you can kind of just go out and putz around, and now with really advanced tools that weren't available to the average person putzing around 20 years ago. But
the bird ID binoculars.
Well, yeah, there's the bird ID binoculars, but just on our phones for free. I think Merlin is a free app. You have the ability to recognize birdsong with deadly accuracy, and that's when the realization really came. Like, not only did I not know that much about birds, but I also just, like, wasn't even aware. I wasn't seeing them properly.
Yeah.
You go out for a walk, whatever, you're in a park in, whatever city you live in, see some pigeons. Oh, I see that. Oh, maybe you see an American robin. I recognize that bird.
I see that bird all the time.
Yeah, you're on the East Coast, maybe you see a blue jay. You're like, yeah, I know birds. I know bird names. I see the birds that are out here. I hear the birds. And then you go out there with your phone and there's, like,
oh my God.
What?
Oh my God. There is a roadrunner on the back, like, literally putting its butthole on our window right now. Oh my God. Chase, have you ever been this close?
No. What is happening?
What is going on?
It heard the bird talk.
Oh, it's a mating male. It's a mating male. Do you see the colors next to its eyes? So bright.
Kaya's down below it. She might have spooked it.
Oh my God. This is unreal. Look at how long that tail is. Hi, come here. Are you kidding me? Oh wow. My God, that was insane.
For the listeners, maybe this will be in the visualizer.
Oh my God. So we have Max Tracks, like, on the back of our truck, and we're sitting, like, up at the dinette table that's up against that window. And I guess it was perched on, our friend's dog must have scared it up onto the back of our truck. I've never seen a roadrunner that close.
Yeah, that was crazy.
That was insane. That tail, man, is so long.
The tail's long. I felt like the bird in general just seemed like somehow smaller that close than it looks from a distance.
It was literally pressing its cloaca on our window.
Yeah, that was wild. Yeah, where was I? I was on a really long-winded way of trying to get to a point here.
We were talking about, like, deadly accuracy. Oh, being out, seeing birds that you see all the time.
Oh, right, yeah. So when you go out with, the Merlin ID app, for example, and you're somebody who, like most non-birders, hasn't memorized, like, 80% of North American bird calls by ear, and you take out the app and it starts listing off all these birds that your phone is hearing and identifying, I was like, holy shit. There's like 20 different species of birds in this park, and all I'm seeing is a pigeon and a robin. There's all these birds up in the trees, out of sight, and they're calling. So they're making themselves observable, but just in a way that I hadn't tuned my senses to. And that was like hugely eye-opening. Even for somebody who fancied themselves observant, I realized like, oh, there's so many different levels and depth to the way you can observe the natural world, the way the early naturalists did, who were interested in sort of like broad understandings of the natural world. And that's been really enriching. And I'm trying to just sort of apply that in general. As people, we like to specialize in things, and some of that is just our natural tendencies, and some of that is probably like societal pressure. Like focus on something, get good at it, it can help you earn a living, and all that's true. And like, for example, the lane that I've existed in, that both my wife and I have existed in professionally, is like very river fish, freshwater fish focused. River ecosystems and fish and fishing. I'm a fish illustrator. We make fly fishing films. So it's been very, very specialized. I have a very, deep and broad understanding of that world. But then, here's the bird world. And I thought I had not equal understanding, but I thought I had better understanding than I did. And now I'm, learning just through this app that, has like the fine-tuned ears of the greatest birders on earth, because it's literally using algorithmic technology to identify bird song. But, and I didn't even realize that there's people who can do this. And I've, been out since then with really experienced birders, and they don't have the app out, and they're still hearing stuff that even the app isn't picking up, and that I'm not picking up on either. So people can do that. There's this understanding people can do that, and they're not, not that they're not special people, but their specialty is just that they've spent time listening the same way I've spent time poking around with fish or whatever. They spend time poking around with birds. And just in a year of birding more seriously, I can't believe how much our knowledge base has expanded on that stuff. And I'm trying to apply that to everything.
Hey there, Mac here. I don't know why I said that. It's always Mac. Anyways, if you're enjoying Camp Nowhere, maybe you would want to consider checking out our Patreon. By joining, you'll get access to a ton of cool things, such as the ad-free version of this podcast, early screenings to our films, behind-the-scenes glimpses into life on the road, and a whole lot more exclusive content. Plus, your support helps us keep creating and improving as multifaceted storytellers. We legitimately could not do it without you, so a big thank you to everyone who has already joined us in our sunny little corner of the internet. If you're curious, take a spin around at headnowhere.com/Patreon. See you there. 1 trekking pole, 2 trekking pole. I was just setting up my trekking poles because we are about to go for a hike, and I had a thought. I love my trekking poles so much. Just setting them up gets me so stoked to be out on trail. And I think that just having the right piece of gear for the job just kind of does that to you. It makes you excited to get outside and do what you love. As a self-proclaimed gear nerd, I have made detailed gear guides plus some handy affiliate links and discount codes for brands that we personally know, love, and trust. If you decide to grab anything from those links or gear guides, it helps support all of our creative projects that we're working on, from films to podcasts and life on the move. So, if you are gearing up for your next adventure, check it out at headnowhere.com/gear, and thank you so much for helping us stay rolling. Okay, gotta run. This trail is not gonna hike itself. So I'm curious if there has been a specific thing that you have come to understand about the world, about something very specific by pure observation. I feel like this is my personal favorite. It happened here in Baja 2 years ago. It was before you all met up with us, and Owen and I were at our Dead Things beach. And for the record, I have a deep affinity for looking at dead things. I just think that being able to come across and observe a dead animal, as morbid as that is, that's not often the closest that you're ever going to get to a lot of these animals.
Yeah.
And so by being able to have a period of time with something that otherwise is elusive, evasive, like has no interest in being near you for understandable reasons, there's so much that you can come to understand about it.
Yeah.
Particularly when looking, if it's like in a skeletal phase, it's quite, particularly with mammals, you can kind of see how evolution has moved similar parts around the body plan, so to speak. But my personal favorite was we found a skeletal stingray, and I found a mouth plate from a stingray, and I was looking at it, and I was realizing it's this conveyor belt of flat plates in the same way that shark's teeth are a conveyor belt. And it was funny because for whatever reason, most of the times, like if I observe something that I'm like drawing parallels to, I will often look into it to confirm or, refute what it is that I have observed, which is the great thing about modern technology and having Google and the ability to like look into these things. But for whatever reason, I didn't. I was just like, holy shit, this same thing is happening. It's this conveyor belt of teeth. They get worn out. They drop off the front. New ones come in through the back. And it wasn't until literally a few months ago, Zay Frank, one of my personal favorite like YouTube channels, he did a video on stingrays, and he talked about the conveyor belt of teeth. And I, in that moment, realized I never went back and looked into that any further. But the fact that I had completely drawn accurate conclusions on like the fact that it was the same mouth plan and design with just like a totally different tooth structure was like maybe one of the moments where I realized that maybe all of this like observational knowledge has like more validity than I've ever given it credit for. Like for how much I've learned.
Right, totally. Yeah, and again, we tend to look at it as like real science, and then maybe if you're even like a little bit more advanced, we'll call it like citizen science, right? Where it's like, well, like technically uneducated people can still do like
I love citizen science. I love
do good scientific work if like given some directives by people who do have, an education in science. They say, hey, well, similar to the Merlin bird app, people go out, they record sounds of birds, they tag where those birds were located, and that information gets aggregated into, the general ornithological understanding of birds and bird migration, right? There's now millions of field biologists who never went to school, never got a biology degree, who are out doing field work, field studies. That's what, something that people would consider citizen science or whatever.
Yeah.
But even below that, even if you're not aggregating knowledge, even if you're not submitting it to an ornithological society somewhere to be put into a broader understanding, if you're just going out and looking for yourself and you're finding ray jawbones, I think that observation, you're looking at it and you're noticing how these teeth are moving in rows up like a conveyor belt, and you can make those sort of observations. Like you are doing scientific work. That is science, looking at something and saying, hey, this looks like this. Why does it look like that? I'm trying to think if I've got a personal example. Not one off the top of my head. I can say it's fresh on my mind because we're on a beach here where there's, I don't know if it's a year thing. There was always lots of porcupine fish, which we've learned what porcupine fish are from being down here in Baja, again, just from observing. We initially would call them puffer fish because they puff up just like puffer fish do. Most people will be familiar with puffer fish. I think there's probably a lovable puffer fish in Finding Nemo or something. I mean, like most people know what I'm saying when I say puffer fish.
For sure.
But they have particularly long spines.
Visible when not
yeah.
puffed.
Yeah, it looks like not like tacks, more like nails on a balloon or something, right? They're like really long spines. Those are porcupine fish. We learned that just from looking at them and saying, gosh, these puffer fish have really long spines. What is that? And, looking it up and discovering that they're puffer fish. But we're on a beach where there's a ton of puffer fish. I don't know if it's just this year. There's always been, or porcupine fish. There's always been a lot of them here. We've been here in years past, but went snorkeling the other day. We saw a gazillion. I walked the beach this morning, probably saw hundreds dead washed up on the beach. So there seems to be a particular abundance. But what's really interesting about those, and I only know this again because we find carcasses where most of the organic matter has all decayed away and all that's left is just sort of the sharp bony stuff, is that all those spines that are coming off the body of these porcupine fish interlock in this kind of like complex geometric pattern that's very reminiscent of, what is the name of the like toy for kids that's like
Chinese finger trap?
well, not like an erector set, but those balls
that like
expand
out
and open.
Yeah,
sort of like
I know exactly what you're talking about.
Geometric constructor toys or whatever. Anyway, the way they sort of like interlock, and I think it works very similarly for them to be able to be small when unpuffed and then large when puffed. Yeah, it's really interesting. If you looked at it when it was alive in the water, all you'd see is this one spine coming out from the skin, but then when the skin is removed, if you find a carcass washed up, you'll see that it's actually more like tripoded out on the base with then a spine coming out, and those tripods that are underneath the skin all interlock perfectly with each other in like...
It's almost like an Escher painting,
Yeah.
like that kind of like interlocking...
insane mathematical geometric accuracy that boggles the mind. How,
But it's on this like completely seemingly helpless fish that can
Yeah.
barely swim.
Yeah. That's really cool. I mean, that's the kind of stuff that, you'd only know if you spent the time beach combing and looking at stuff and picking stuff up. I mean, it's not the only way. If you studied marine biology, if you went to college, you probably learned that too.
For the rest of us.
Yeah.
So this feels like an obvious, this feels so obvious to me, but I feel like I still have to ask. That like observational eye, you obviously bring that into your work. And those things go hand in hand. How do you bring your observation, your keen eye of the natural world? How do you like to bring that and aid in your work?
Well, some of it I can't help. I just happen to be a very like detail-oriented person. Someone you'd probably call a perfectionist. And
I would.
It's a blessing and a curse. It's incredibly useful in my fine art practice where, well, whether I would have found this if I wasn't who I am, I don't know. But what I've ended up specializing in is natural history illustration, people call scientific illustration, particularly of fish. Anything in the natural world has an immense amount of detail when you look at it closely, but these are like, what I'm attempting to do is paint fish with, scientific accuracy to the millimeter as best I can. There's always some level of abstraction when you're painting something on paper. It's never going to actually be the fish itself. It's a rendition of that thing, and between the real thing and the rendition, there's always some level of abstraction that comes from the artist's hand. But attempting to, render things with really, really fine, as fine as you can see with your eyes, level of accurate detail. So it helps to be a very observant, detail-oriented person to be able to do that. I think I ended up doing that because I'm that type of person, not the other way around. I decided that I wanted to do that, and good thing I was this type of person because it's helped in that practice. I think it sort of forced me into that practice because I'm incapable of working in another way. It's not that I'm
That's
incapable,
okay.
I can, like any good artist, I have enough skill and natural talent to be able to sort of mimic any particular style that I wanted to if I needed to, but in my sort of natural default state, what I end up doing, and to the bane of all my art school teachers when I was young who wanted me to paint more fluidly and impressionistically and more in what maybe
Are you
consider
serious?
like a
It was
high
the
art
opposite
standard.
for me.
Yeah.
They wanted me to be a photorealist. I was told that I should stop drawing because it didn't really match. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I guess every teacher is different. I guess, well, maybe it's a teacher's job to try and push their students outside of whatever their, comfort
I feel like
zone
that's
is.
giving them the benefit of the
Yeah.
doubt. It felt very, I felt very attacked.
Yeah. But anyway, people wanted me to, paint broadly with, more painterly strokes and more color, more conceptual, less detail. Don't get so bogged down in the details, look at the bigger picture, etc. And all that's great for your art education in general. But I was fighting it the whole time. If I just turn my brain off and pick up pencil and paper and say, oh, what's inspiring me, what I want to draw, I'm usually looking at something around me and then drawing it in excruciating detail. It's just where my brain wants to go. So yeah, so I apply that sort of attention to detail and observation, obviously in my fine art practice, because it's needed for that. I don't know that it's necessarily needed in my other creative practices. I'm a filmmaker. Can't really call myself a photographer. I don't shoot a lot of still photo. I'm more cinematographer, but whatever. And capturing images with cameras. I do a little bit of writing, and then obviously I have my fine art practice. But I certainly bring that attention to detail to those things. And yes, sometimes there's more of a detriment when it comes to things like filmmaking. There's a level of perfectionism that can slow down your overall process and, is particularly burdensome when it comes to maintaining a professional working existence and having to meet deadlines and whatever while you're stuck toiling away at something that most people would have called good, weeks earlier, and you're still fussing with some edit, moving a single frame back and forth, trying to get it just right. But I can't help it. It is the person that I am. And I do think that the people who have found my work and gravitate towards my work probably appreciate that level of detail orientation in it. I think my current goal in my professional creative life is to sort of, like you, I've had these two lanes. I've had the sort of naturalist interest since I was a little kid, and then as I got older, and this started when I was a kid too, but obviously through getting my degree in college was focused on the arts, and I ended up in a lane in filmmaking. It wasn't always that path, but I found my way into that path. Is using the skills and abilities I have in those two fields to bridge a really important gap. There's the science, there's the sciences and that world, and there's people who are out there doing research, gathering information about the world around us. And then there's all the people who aren't doing that, who are busy living their lives focused on other things. And the whole point of the sciences, like gathering this understanding about the world in general, is only for people. It's for us. The world doesn't need people to know how it works. The world works regardless.
It's going to do it on its own,
whether
we're
we're
understanding.
right, whether we're observing it or not. So the job of scientists who are observing this stuff is then to share that knowledge with the rest of us so that we can better, exist in this strange experience that we have in front of us. Unfortunately, the type of people it takes to be really, really good high-level scientists, the guys with the test beakers in the labs crunching numbers on computers, generally aren't great communicators. They're the kind of people who can dedicate their lives to sequencing a genome, but maybe aren't so great at telling a good story or making it exciting to other people who aren't, as semi-autistic as they are in this, hyper-focused lane. Yeah, very niche lane. So I happen to have pursued sort of these two ventures in my life, and one of which is really like sort of the art of storytelling and filmmaking and art in general. It's a communication. And then my sort of love of sciences and the natural world. And you talk about having your sort of like second awakening to the natural world, where you're like something really interested in a kid, kind of lost track of that in your young adulthood, and now are like finding your way back. I certainly had a similar path. And for a while, I was kind of bitter about the fact that I hadn't like stayed the course on that, because it's a thing that now my life is mostly revolves around, is like, natural history and naturalism in general. I wish that I should have gone to school and just become a field biologist. What I want to be spending my time doing is like being outside. I could be doing this for a career. It could have streamlined my life so much, and think how much, deeper and quicker my understanding of all these things I love could have been with, an education in those fields. But I've realized that, my greatest skill set is my skill set as an artist and as a communicator and as a storyteller. And I can be of value to this thing that I love in a different way. I don't know that the world is in great need of more good biologists. There's so many great people doing that great work, but there is a scarcity, I think, in good science communicators, especially now at a time where like visual communication is like the default
medium of sharing this kind of getting people interested in something.
So I'm using my skills of being able to sort of like walk between those two worlds, having like a good enough understanding of the sciences and of the natural world to know a lot and also know what I don't know. And that's a work in progress, always working on like not making declarations about how I think the world is, because the older I get, the more I realize my declarations are probably wrong. Doing my
wrong in a big way,
yeah,
as you like to be.
Yeah, I like to be as wrong as possible, and I am wrong. But doing my best to share what I know, and then also aggregate the knowledge that I can glean from true experts in fields, and then make that information easily digestible, interesting, and engaging to people who aren't interested in it. And I think appreciation of detail is important. I think there's tremendous beauty and discovery in observation of close detail and trying to figure out that's the thing, right? That's like the important part about being a good communicator, is because if you just bombard people with data, which is what observation is. It's data. It's like raw data.
Quickly glaze over.
Yeah, people quickly shut down. But if you're able to say, hey, look at this cool detail, and this is why it's so cool, and explain that to people, I think you can sort of make believers out of non-believers really quickly. So anyway, to get to what I was saying about like, at one point I was kind of disappointed that like I hadn't pursued some sort of career in the natural sciences directly through college. I think it's probably better that I didn't. I think I can offer something through my medium and my gifts and my talents as an artist that I couldn't otherwise offer any better than everyone else who's already doing the hard scientific work, which is kind of like a hard pill to swallow, because I think there's something really, really cool about expertise in general. I was saying, when you're a kid, that's like nerdy stuff. But now that I'm older, I think that's really, really cool. On the one hand, like I want the sort of like feather in my cap of being able to say like, yeah, I'm a genuine whatever fisheries biologist. Mm-hmm. I am an expert in this field, and I want to have that knowledge. And it would feel very rewarding to say like, yes, I've spent my time and my efforts, and I've gained this. It's not as fun to tell the person walking down the path by the field station in the Mojave, they're like, no, I'm not a scientist. I'm just a guy with a camera, actually, or whatever. But there is a place for people like us in the sciences to help people who are doing really, really serious scientific work get that sometimes really vital information into public hands. Because at the end of the day, again, these are all people issues. Everything that we talk about exists between the human and natural world interaction, and how people are going to interface with the natural world going forward rests entirely on how people feel about the natural world, what they know about the natural world. So getting that information into people's hands is key to that,
Yeah. I've been increasingly frustrated with how shy I am about it. Like getting really into the nitty-gritty, because it doesn't mean that I haven't done it,
Right.
but I pull back a great deal on it when I go to share it, because I think that historically I haven't maybe necessarily felt like it was my place
Sure.
to share, because I haven't felt like, I don't know, like there is this thing,
Yeah.
this like degree that I may be missing to be able to be the one that has the ability to share it. But I will say that my friendship with you and you being like a peer of mine from the storytelling perspective has increasingly made me feel, dare I say, emboldened to do so. But I think that it is something that's so important to me, and I feel like I've been really shy about that, and I don't know why that has been. So instead, I would say that my historic approach to it is like I'm trying to be really sneaky about just like getting people to fall in love
Right.
with the world, so they will start to care about it. And just like appreciating it from like a beauty and a detail perspective, because I felt like that was my gateway back into it, so to speak, to start caring about it in a bigger way, and to like, because the thing is like the curiosity has to be there.
Yeah.
Because if the curiosity is not there, like you're not paying attention.
Right.
Because like you, as you've said, like you can see things, but until you know about it, you don't actually see it.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I think it is important to be a little sneaky. That's kind of like the sleight of hand magic of a good communicator, right? Is because again, like I said, the person that I feel like I'm targeting with our work is the person who isn't interested in what I'm talking about. Because again, I don't need to tell the person who already loves this stuff to love it more.
Yeah.
You know?
They're there.
They're there. They're already, they're going to love it the same way I love it already. I'm trying to speak to the person who maybe doesn't value this, or is on the fence about valuing it, or hasn't even considered it at all. I'm trying to recruit more people to love and care about nature. So sometimes, you have to be a little bit sneaky, because people have all sorts of triggers that immediately turn them off or shut them down about any of this stuff. Some of that's because it's like weirdly politicized these days, and some of it's just whatever. People's, time is
Preconceived
precious.
notion,
Their time is precious. They don't have a ton of time to, luxuriate going down rabbit holes they're not necessarily interested in. People focus on what they're interested in. So, famously, like my wife and I make fly fishing films. Anyone who knows anything about like fishing films, this is like a very specific sort of like formula and genre. And by all measures, like we don't make good fishing films. We get comments all the time on our films being like, I'm half an hour into this, I haven't seen a fish yet. Like it's not the standard
Oh my God,
formula.
I've never thought about that.
Yeah, it's not the standard formula of a fishing film, but I'm not trying to speak directly to other anglers. I'm not trying to ignore them. Obviously, I am one, so...
Don't worry, there'll be fish.
Yeah, there's going to be fish in there, but I'm interested in sort of like pulling people in. Like I talk about like, it's like a little bit of sugar helps the medicine go down or whatever. I try and lure people in with other sort of exciting, interesting things that I think have more broader appeal than this very like niche thing about fish, because most people don't really care about fish. And then I hope that at the end of it, after you've seen all this other sort of like broad, engaging content that I hope has sort of interested and lured people in, is they take away something about fish that they didn't when they started. And yeah, I think that's okay. It is kind of sneaky, but I think that's necessary in just like telling any sort of good story. Is to sort of surprise the viewer or the reader or the listener at the end with
There's more to this.
Yeah, something that they didn't expect. And I think it's the thing, you said it's like, I don't know that people want to hear this from me or whatever, you're making a series in Alaska and you want to talk about the bears, and you're like, people don't need to hear from me these bear facts. They should hear it from a bear biologist or whatever. But the point is, people aren't going to hear it from a bear biologists, because people aren't going to seek out some study about grizzly bears, unless it whatever has some broader appeal because Timothy Treadwell gets eaten or something and it ends up in an
Thank you for
article by the New
vote
York
of
Times,
confidence.
right? People gravitate towards your work because it has a broader appeal to people. It highlights things that lots of people can be interested in and enjoy. And then once you've got people paying attention and listening to you because they're interested in, broader themes of travel, exploration, nature in general, then you're able to like slip in, hey, check out like this neat little factoid here or whatever. And then people walk away, 1% more nature educated at the end of it.
Yeah.
But yeah, like I said, I think it's important to remember that like, if they're not going to hear it from you, who are they going to hear it from?
I mean, that's very...
Outside, again, of the niche people who are already obsessed with bears, who are going to go read studies about bears or whatever, even lighter than that, look up Wikipedia articles about bears to educate themselves. If they're not going to get it from you, they're just not going to get it from anyone. So if you're passionate about educating people about things that you have knowledge of, then you just got to be the one to say it.
Yeah, like I said, I feel like that is a developing emboldenedness to share. And I will say, I think in this upcoming series, I will be doing that maybe more so than I have ever done before. Because it's also, I don't know, I just think it's important that people realize that more than just our needs, wants, and desires matter.
Right. Totally.
And that what we do, then just like what we do has radiating effects.
Right. Again, I'm just some guy saying this, but I think the biggest misconception that people have about this sort of dichotomy between the human world and the natural world is that they're actually disconnected.
No, they're the same.
I think that they're the same. And our interests, our as you put it, like our own self-interests are sort of in personal preservation, essentially. And I think those two things are way more connected than people realize. People might not think that like their own selfish desires align with healthy world and healthy ecosystems and healthy natural spaces, but I think they actually do. And I think people are going to find that out one way or the other. So I think it's in everyone's best interest to sort of align themselves in a way where we can be the best people we are. And I think we're the best people when we have good, abundant, connected natural spaces to be people in. Yeah, it's where we came from. It's where we're going. And we have a lot of power. People have, the amount of climate, geological, ecological change humans can enact on the planet is really, really staggering. So it's definitely sort of in our hands. But again, I think the world would be fine sans people, with people, regardless. The power that we have really is to affect our own, how nice it is for us to be here while we're here. If people went extinct tomorrow, I think, whatever course the Earth is going to take, it's going to take that course fine over large geological time spans. But I'm not so concerned really about a billion years in the future. I'm more concerned about the time span that we're here and our children and children's children are going to be here. So it's up to us trying to figure out a way to make that all manageable and livable,
Yeah.
Not to pontificate too much about everything.
Do you have anything else that you want to add?
No, just want to say thank you for having me on. Thank you for the kind things. I'm glad that I've helped in some small way on your journey.
No,
you and Owen have helped tremendously on Amy and mine as well.
That's sweet. Yeah, I think that just have felt incredibly, like I don't even know that I would have pursued storytelling if,
right,
to the degree I have, if it wasn't for our relationship with the two of you. Because I just don't think that I knew anybody who was pursuing
Right.
that.
Yeah.
And I think that the first connection, I think, was genuinely the fact that like you and Amy like to wander around and stare at the ground. Like we could do it all day, and we do it often.
Yeah.
Where we just go out and wander, look at stuff, no real objectives, just leave camp, see what there is to see, discuss our findings, compare notes. But then also to see how that like translates into both of your work separately and together. Yeah, and I think it's also just like made us feel like we're maybe a little bit less alone.
Yeah.
And I'm very, very appreciative about your creative insight,
Well, thanks.
your sense of taste and detail. I mean, I admire you as an artist more so than just about anybody I know.
Well, thanks. That's really, really kind of you to say. I admire you guys tremendously too, as artists, as people, as everything. And yeah, I've just more and more come to realize that like
There's value there.
there's value there, and that's my gift to the world, of whatever, is my perspective and ability to disseminate information. As much as like my detail-oriented brain wants to be like, I should be the one getting all the information. I should be out there, in the field doing scientific work because I love that kind of stuff. It's okay that I remain basically a hobbyist on the perimeter of that. My value to those fields can be through my own talents, which is as an artist and a
The irony
communicator.
is you probably spend just as much time out in the quote field.
I know. Well, and as we said, there's real knowledge and revelation to be gleaned from time outside. I encourage everyone to go outside. I encourage everyone to take their kids outside and view things. To be a good scientist, all you need is your eyeballs and your ear balls and your nose balls and
Your tongue
tongue balls.
Oh no.
Just go outside and look around. There's some stuff to see, and it doesn't matter whether or not it's going to some greater, broader scientific knowledge of anything, even if it's just for personal enrichment. That has great value too, and it will be personally enriching. Like I said, I think everyone's default settings is to have some sort of interest or connection to the natural world.
We're wired for it.
Yeah, exactly.
Perfect. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
That was great.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you so much for listening. I hope you enjoyed. As I mentioned at the top of the episode, I will include all the links to Chase and Amy's Tight Loops Fly, all of their work in the show notes down below. And even though you just heard from Chase in this episode, you will soon be hearing from Amy on a very different topic that is also very near and dear to my heart. Thank you so much, and we'll see you down the road.